Well, good morning, everybody. I want to start you off today by looking at some satellite imagery, and this starts from yesterday. I know a lot of the country saw some pretty dense fog, and you can kind of see that in certain places here throughout the scattered cloud field we're looking at, especially up here in parts of the Columbia Basin. But one of the big features we're watching, there's actually two large storm systems. The first one, you can see it coming over parts of Nevada into Utah yesterday, and as the sun set, that first system is beginning to kind of eject, coming out right here early this morning. Now, we're going to have to watch this very carefully because it's kind of a multi-part system. There's the big subtropical ridge causing the flow like this behind it. We're going to have to see how this interacts with the colder air that's to the west of it. And then we're watching a system follow it. And that's going to be the big dog right there. So if we look at our all hazards weather map this morning, still a lot of places dealing with fog. And that's what this particular shade is representing. But now you see that where that first system's coming out, they've issued winter weather advisories across several states here in the Midwest and the Plains. In the West, this is where the action is really going to start to pick up as we work our way toward the weekend, and I want to get to all of it here in a few moments. There's quite a bit of rain in this forecast, and we've already seen over the last 72 hours heavy rains that have stretched from the Red River Valley of the south into the Tennessee Valley, and that's been the target area that we've been kind of focusing on for the heaviest rains going forward. But the next system that's coming through, well, just kind of take a look at the overall picture for this next week. This is total accumulated precipitation, liquid equivalent where there's snow. And you can see that this next system is really going to open, a large corridor here in the midsection of the United States to very wet weather. Unfortunately, due to the trajectory of this low, as we talked about yesterday, the dry slot on the back side of it will very much impact the already very dry parts of the high plains here in parts of Kansas, the panhandles, and getting into this part of Colorado. But the potential for very heavy snow, not only here in the upper Midwest and northern plains, but along California's mountain ranges into southern Oregon and throughout the Rockies is quite high. So again, we're going to see this map change a lot here over the next 48 to 60 hours or so. Now let's begin with the first system. So we're starting here at 8 o'clock this morning, and we're just going to play this for it so you can kind of see the two components. The upper level low is here. The flow around the subtropical ridge is right in through this area. So we just play this through today. This is getting into this evening, into the overnight hours, and then to early tomorrow morning. I'll go back and forth over that. Notice that coming out of Nebraska into southern South Dakota, clipping Iowa and Wisconsin, there's going to be some snow. We'll take a look at the snowfall totals in a second. Possibility of getting a little bit of freezing rain in here as well, but the main frontal boundary pushes through with some rain that goes eventually through parts of Iowa, Missouri, into Illinois, and then works its way into the eastern Corn Belt. Now, this particular low kind of loses its upper level support in favor of the next big system that's coming into the west. So a lot of you I know that are over here watching this, you've just been watching the west the whole time. And this system is coming out of the Gulf of Alaska, and it's going to dip into a large trough that's over the west. And it's going to be able to put down quite a bit of snow. We'll take a look at those totals in a few seconds. It's not your full-on, atmospheric river event. This is just a low that snuck in from kind of the northwest that dives into the western United States, but it's going to pack a punch. Before we get there, though, I want to show you, this is the probability of getting at least 2 inches of snow, and I'm only focusing here on the Midwest. I'll show you the western numbers in a second. But we're just kind of narrowing in on that band of where we could potentially see some heavier snow out of system number 1. Now, as we get into system number 2, I want to explain to you something that I got asked about yesterday when I was in Montana. It's about the jet stream behavior, specifically with respect to the tilt of troughs. Now, what I want to show you here is I'm going to park this on Saturday, and what we're going to watch here is this particular ridge that dives into this trough. Now, if you look at this, if you just kind of follow the cursor, you notice that I'm drawing a line. In fact, I'll just draw a line there. That's got a tilt that leans forward or to the east. We call that a positively tilted trough. And positively tilted troughs, which look more like forward slashes, they dig, so they dive. Now, what's interesting about trough behavior is that a lot of times they'll dive into the west like this one does right here by Sunday midday. And then as it crosses the Rocky Mountains, if there is not strong westward flow behind it, and no there isn't, look at this, the flow is just highly amplified, more meridional, meaning north-south, than it is west to east, then this upper level trough goes from having this positive tilt to now having a negative tilt. In other words, it looks more like a backslash. And what the importance about this is this means that the system slows down. It tends to draw in a deeper reservoir of Gulf moisture as it spirals up into a low, and therefore it becomes a multi-day setup rather than a system that races across the country. What's interesting about this low is that it's going to start this Saturday, and then it's going to be around for the entire week because it actually, according to the models, gets cut off by next Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and just slowly spins across the country. And we're on the lookout late next week for the potential for a big East Coast cyclone. But the flow is a mess. It's not extending from Japan across the whole of the United States, and it's broken up, which means we get multiple systems out of this. So let's go show it to you. Sorry, I was already parked out here looking at the effect of this by next Tuesday, but I want to get back to the beginning. So we've already seen system number 1. There it is in both models, the European on the right, GFS on the left, and that one fizzles out. We see more showers right here in the models still coming around that southeast ridge. But the next system, here it is, diving into the northwest, pulls through the northwest into California, goes over the Four Corners states, and ejects. Now look at how, the models are in very good agreement about this. This is next Tuesday morning, getting into Tuesday midday, Tuesday night, getting in through the overnight hours out into next Wednesday morning, Wednesday midday, Wednesday night. And what we see here is just a slow-moving system due to that change in the tilt, leaving it around the United States and potentially showing up late next week as a big East Coast cyclone. So if we just kind of distill this down into a few things, I want to talk first about the severe weather threat. On Monday, the Storm Prediction Center is watching the Red River Valley. On Tuesday, it's watching the lower Mississippi River Valley. There's very high wind shear, going to pull in deep amount of moisture, and it won't take much instability to create a big thunderstorm outbreak here. It's the shear plus the strength of that front that's going to drive this threat. So if you're in this area, be on the lookout for this. In terms of total rain and snow, this map over here shows you through the next 7 days total accumulated precipitation for the west. And it just shows you that as the system comes in, we do have places here along the border of Oregon and California that could get 6, 7, 8 inches of total precipitation, and then very heavy snows in the Sierra Nevada. But even the Central Valley could get 0.3 to maybe 1 inch or more of total accumulated precip. Of course, this extends into the northwest, and as the system ejects, it really delivers quite a bit of snow. Take a look at this. That is the 7-day snowfall forecast. And now we can see that maybe parts of the Klamath Mountains through the peaks of the Sierra Nevada, 2 to 4 feet of snow. A lot of snow piling up here on the northern edge of Idaho's Snake River Valley. This is an area that already has a tremendous amount of snowpack. And then through Montana, right in through eastern Montana, there is the possibility of seeing quite a bit of snow out of this. Now let's go over to the Midwest. I'm going to show you this first because there's still some uncertainty with how much we could get, okay? But this is the probability of getting at least 6 inches of snow. We're kind of just trying to bullseye in on the area that's going to get the most. There's even in through here about a 50% chance of a foot of snow. Now the operational model runs, which are over here, are really going after delivering a lot of moisture. So can you look at this map and just take it with a grain of salt? You know how this works, right? We can't look at these maps and say, oh, I'm going to get exactly 24.8 inches. This is a model forecast. It's going to have a lot of variability. But just see that the idea here is that this region could pick up a lot of snow here going into this system next week. From there, I want to also show you who's going to be dry versus who's going to be wet. Parts of the Western Canadian Prairie, parts of the southern and high plains, getting into Mexico. Big dry slot comes in on the back side of this, ruining the chances for decent moisture return. But very wet throughout parts of the Mid-South into the Tennessee and Ohio Valley. And then again, a lot of this coming in the form of snow, but some heavy rains to the south of it here into parts of the Corn Belt. On the temperature side of it, let's just go have a quick look at what these temperatures are going to do. You're going to notice that throughout much of the next 7 days, the coldest air seems to stay anchored over the west. We do have some chilly air coming into the mid-Atlantic and the Carolinas on what we call a backdoor cold front. But overall, this is going to be a mild forecast for much of the midsection of the country, with the coldest air anchored west. And Montana just keeps getting repeated shots of very cold air. Now we want to know, is this ever going to change? Because we keep kicking the can down the road as to when the colder air gets let out. And the new model forecasts for week 2 suggest deepening the trough over the west, but keeping the big ridges over the North Atlantic and over the Arctic might allow some of that cold air to finally move to the east, which we've been kind of pushing back in the forecast here throughout this week. So that's the week 1 versus week 2 temperature analysis. I'll cover this in more in-depth kind of an analysis in tonight's report. The other thing we're going to focus on is what this pattern does to finish the month. Now, you do see a bit of a block setting up. Imagine what you can see off the edge of the screen here, but there seems to be kind of an omega block setting up over Alaska. And that dips a trough into the west. But the flow, if I could just take that arrow off, the flow is coming in like this. And the question is, will these troughs, will there be short waves that come out of this one that actually pull in the moisture into the midsection of the country? And what happens with this big East Coast trough as it exits? Because right now the models are drier in the northwest simply because they have the flow coming in like this. But with troughs of low pressure over California, got to watch this because this is a setup that could send systems across the United States, which means we can't really hang our hat on this week 2 precipitation anomaly forecast with a lot of confidence. It appears that it's going to be active going into the mid part of December toward the solstice. Now, in tonight's in-depth report, I'm also going to show you some better ways to use one of my favorite sites. I got a lot of questions about this and what we can do with it. So I'm just going to set you up in this video by saying we're going to look at South America pretty closely. This map is a Vegetation Health Index product, satellite derived, and it's showing us the difference between this year and a year ago. And this just illustrates, you see the negative values down here about the drought stresses that we're dealing with in Argentina, the delayed planting. That's one of the big focuses what we'll talk about. I'll show you some of the other neat tools with this. But over the next 15 days, heavy rains are forecast in a corridor that kind of sits just like this, that hits a lot of Brazil's growing area. And even where you see it drier here in like western Mato Grosso to Rondônia, they're still going to get a couple of inches of rain out of this pattern. So it's not so dry that it's going to impact yield. But down into Argentina, that's a different climate regime down here. To be drier than normal like this just shows us that the scattered nature of these thunderstorms is not going to relieve the longer-term drought. And in today's report, I show you some of the recent precipitation anomalies around Cordoba, which is right where the cursor is, a very agriculturally productive area that is deep in drought right now. So I'll stop there. I'll prepare that in-depth report for you tonight. I look forward to sharing that with you, and we'll talk then. Thanks.